Hello and welcome back to GameSpot's coverage of E3 2016. I'm delighted to be joined by Ed Beach, the lead designer on Civilization 6. Firaxis Games, you are flying the flag for Firaxis at E3 this year.
Absolutely.
You got some folks back at the booth as well showing off Civ 6?
We got 3 members of our dev team that are here with us, and I'm out to talk to GameSpot and fill you in on all the details, anything you want to know about Civ 6.
Awesome. We got a bunch of questions, but if you have any questions in the chat, I know the Civilizations fans, that community, always very good with their specific questions. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on the GameSpot chat and also the Twitch chat, so make sure you get them in there. I mean, you know, Civ is the godfather of sort of 4X games. It must be hard to try and reinvent these games every iteration, right? You were also the lead on 5, is that right?
I was the lead for the 2 expansions on 5.
Oh, right, okay.
So for Gods and Kings and Brave New World. It's really cool because this is the 25th anniversary of the very first Civilization, so it's like the perfect year to be putting out a new title. And we've had quite a few years to kind of stew on what we're going to do this time. Basically, ever since Brave New World came out, it was like right into Civ 6 for me. So Civilization 6 has a couple key new concepts, and we have a video that we're showing here in the background that we'll be able to pick out some things and highlight them.
Yeah,
the number one thing is what we're doing where we call it Unstacking the Cities.
Right.
So everything that had been crammed in that one tile before, all the buildings, all the wonders of the world, they now have to find a place. You have to find out where outside that city you want to put them on the map. And all the positioning of all those elements outside the city is really strategically important. So they're a whole new, kind of layer of decisions that you're faced with that you hadn't been faced with before. And so that's sort of what's really freshened up the gameplay and made it really exciting.
Yeah, so talk to some of those, because obviously it's hard to sort of try and imagine them right now, but presumably there are some sort of tiles that you want to keep more protected than others, perhaps? Like, how does that sort of work?
The way it works is there are 12 different types of what we call districts that are tiles that you dedicate outside the city for a specific pursuit. So it's a campus is your scientific district, or a holy site is your religious district. And you can't have all 12 around the same city.
Right.
So you're going to have to specialize your cities. In the video, the first city had we haven't put any districts in, but you can see there's some farms went in around that. And then the second city here, we settled that on the ocean, which gave us some boosts in our new research system, which we can talk about for a while if we want. Now we're connecting a trade route back to the original city, and one of the changes we made is all the improvements in roads work. We've sort of also revamped that for Civilization 6. So now, early in the game, all of your roads are built through the traders, and the network of trade routes that you establish sort of gives you the default layer of roads. You can add some specific ones later when you get to military engineers, but for right now, it's sort of the traders are going to establish how the cities are connected up. Here we're going to put in our first district. We're going to have a holy site. The game will show you the bonuses you can get from different places you want to put it. People want to worship, like with majestic mountains in the background, or a natural wonder, something like that.
You've thought of everything.
Yeah. We've come up with, for all those 12 different types of districts, what should it be next to? And
don't
so
put the religious thing in the swamp.
a lot of fun little rules like that. The religious one, is easy to figure out what makes sense there. So now we're going to show you what happens with wonders. Wonders are also pulled out from the city. So we're going to build the pyramids. Pyramids have to go into a desert tile. This city just happened to have a desert nearby. And we've brought back the wonder movies that we used to have in Civ 4, where it's a specific animation of how that wonder is built. But now it's happening in-engine, outside your city, exactly what's going on. If you have an army camped on your borders, you'll see the army in the animation video. It's very fun and cool, and to sort of, you get a lot more investment into sort of the personalization of all your cities, because you've specialized them, you've sort of laid them out piece by piece. You get to see all the wonders go into play. You also see throughout this video that we have, with the new art system that we have a time of day system.
Right, okay.
So we can change it from sunrise through to noontime lighting, and then onto sunset and into the evening. When we get, this is kind of a video that walks you through the course of a single game of Civilization, so by the end we'll be in modern times, and you'll see that the cities are lit up with lights and It's fun. You can play like that if you like. You can,
Right.
set it to cycle through day-night cycles as you play, or you can just keep it on a specific setting if there's like a certain type of day that you just like the way it looks in our art style.
One of the great things about Civilization is watching that sort of drive to the future. How are you guys handling stuff like nuclear war this time around? Are you keeping similar systems in previous games or revamping them?
The big change that you have to think about in terms of combat is now that we've spread the cities across the map, now there are a lot of things that are vulnerable because they're out away from your city.
Right.
And even if you're strong enough to defend your city, maybe you've got walls there and those kind of things, the city core is not going to be captured and you won't lose the entire city, but you could have the science district outside it just rampaged by barbarians that could come through and pillage it. I think we were just seeing some barbarian combat on the video there. And so you have to pick and choose what's going on. And every tile that has like this kind of districts can be pillaged individually. If you're pillaging a science tile, you gain science for your civilization. You're like stealing all the plans for what they were doing on their scientific research. And with nuclear weaponry, we do the same thing, where exactly where that nuke is striking is going to be very important in terms of knowing what its effect is going to be on your city. Here's our first leader. We are trying to pick big, fun, very flavorful personalities for a leader.
Is Gandhi still OP?
Gandhi's always OP, right? But so we chose Teddy Roosevelt for the
Very
Americans.
good, yeah.
He's just the coolest guy, the Rough Rider. He's out west. He's fighting off the Spanish on San Juan Hill in Cuba. He's all over the place. Plus, what we're doing with the leaders this time is we are giving them all a specific diplomatic agenda from history, and that's how they like to play Civilization.
Right.
This is a quick look at the new Civic and government system. So now it's a little bit of Civ 4, it's a little bit of Civ 5. Each of those cards there is like a social policy from Civ 5, but they get configured into a government that has those different slots there.
Right.
And so you have to both pick a government and then figure out which social policies you want to be using at a given point in time. You actually end up reconfiguring your government, like, we're enacting new legislation and now we're going to be really good at building up our districts or whatever. So there's a lot of fun and flexibility and sort of configurability in terms of how you like to role play your Civ that comes out of the government system.
Yeah.
It seems to me over the past few years that the strategy scene has been growing. It's sort of returning to where it was maybe in the 90s in some ways in terms of popularity, or at least the flow of games.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious because you're obviously adding things that make the game more complex, which speaks to the fans. How do you playtest this with new audiences, maybe who aren't traditionally into strategy? How do you incorporate approachability or accessibility when it comes to a game that is so complex in so many ways?
Yeah, and initially the art style is different, and we talked about people. We're going to have a quick playing multiplayer games. There's a lot of people like, oh, is it going to be dumbed down? But you're absolutely right. You hit it right spot on that this game is more complex even than Civ 5 was. But what we're trying to do is really attack it with just a vastly improved user interface that's going to bring a lot of information out. So you could see when you're placing a district there before, there were no rules that you had to memorize in your head about what's, we are going to give you all that information and bring it out for you. So you'll say, I'm going to take a holy site and put it on the map, and it will compute all the bonuses for every single tile, and you'll be able to get tooltips and stuff so you can see where those bonuses are coming from and start to understand ahead of time, because then the next time you settle a new city, you'll be able to look for those things and say, aha, near the mountains. It's very interesting. Mountains used to be an awful place.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And now everyone wants mountains. They're like, I need them for my holy sites. And we give science bonuses for mountains too, because you can put observatories up there.
Right. Yeah.
So mountains are actually very, very useful now.
Peter's question about accessibility is spot on. I mean, especially
here's a great example of what combat's doing outside the city.
Oh, right.
You have to defend things. You can see districts are pillaged. Our poor holy soul looks like a mess here. It's smoking and ruined. This is an Egyptian attack. We saw Cleopatra appear on there briefly. She's the leader of Egypt. Her agenda is she likes to ally with strong leaders. So if you think about historically, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, those were her friends. She's kind of avoided getting conquered by Rome by befriending Rome.
Yes.
And so that's how she plays the game. She wants the strong, big, beefy military civs to be her allies to protect her.
Stay away, Gandhi.
So in this particular game, now we're besieging her city. this isn't going to go well for Cleopatra,
Right.
so we're going to see her bemoaning the loss of Egypt here. But, again, you can get a good example of how combat is pulled out from the city as well.
Right, yeah.
And there's specific effects.
Sad Cleopatra.
Sad.
So we're saying about, I guess, the accessibility issue there. Jake Solomon's team on XCOM seemed to do a really good job of actually making a game accessible, and I loved the old XCOM games, and they were incredibly difficult to penetrate. Have you guys learned from that, and have you learned anything from Beyond Earth, that team, what they were working on as well? Because presumably that was in tandem with what you're working on here.
Yeah, I'm a big XCOM fan and sunk hundreds of hours into all of our XCOM titles, and so I love those games. There are snippets of little UI that you'll see pulled from XCOM. XCOM always has a movement boundary. You select a soldier, and it shows you exactly how far you can get in that turn with that. And I've never been able to figure out what the XCOM movement rules are. How fast can you go up and down ladders and jump off things? It's always been very confusing.
Yeah,
but you don't need to know those because the movement boundary's there. So we did exactly the same thing.
Right.
We actually did change up the movement rules a little bit because I wanted to reflect the terrain a little bit better. But we just put in that blue movement boundary, and all of a sudden it's clear what's going on with
Right, yeah. What about sort of stuff like new cultures, new nations? We're seeing a lot of familiar faces here, the Americas and Cleopatra and whatnot. There has always been some sort of underserved parts of the world, like Africa and South America as well. Are you adding new cultures into the game?
There are going to be 18 civilizations when we release, and we absolutely are going to have some brand new ones that have never been in the series before. They're not the ones we're going to announce first.
Right, fair enough.
With the tried and true ones first. So that's kind of we've announced 4 so far. So it's America, Egypt, the 2 that we saw here, and then China and Japan. So those are the 4 announced civilizations. But we're going to hit new areas, hit civilizations that we haven't covered in the series before. And one thing that we are going to do is, it's always struck me very interesting how our fans love to play on a true Earth map.
Right, yes.
And that's a very, very popular mode for Civilization. And I think we didn't service that well enough in Civ 5.
Right.
And so with only 18 civilizations, we can't hit all the spots of the world right out of the gate. But we have plans for trying to balance those true Earth setups much better than we.
Don't worry. If the British arm has Ireland as well, I'll forgive you. Don't worry about it. It's okay. I mean, another thing that's very popular with Civ 5 is I forget what they're called, but demo versions where they just fill them full of AI.
Right.
I've seen this explode on YouTube.
Autoplay games.
Yeah, autoplay games on YouTube. Have you done anything to?
We actually the great thing is that on Civ 5, I didn't start as the lead designer. I started as the lead AI engineer.
Right.
And so it was my job to get the AI tuned up. And it was sort of my job before Civ 5 launched for about 2 years to set up those AI autoplay games and watch them.
Better man
so
to talk about it.
And I always thought they were very cool.
Yeah.
But I never thought they would catch on the way they have.
Sure. Right,
It's sort of like, wow, these people are all doing what I did for a couple
jobs.
years.
People watch other people play games
now
on
they're
YouTube
just
all day.
Exactly. So one of the things we did for Civ 6 is we're like, we need to get our game playing in that automated mode as early as we possibly can.
Right.
And so we actually got a big flat screen TV and stuck it out in the hallway right outside our lead engineer's office. And for months now, it's just 24/7 running autoplay games of Civ 6. And it's great. It catches, if somebody introduces a crash or a bug or something that, we'll find it. People go out to lunch, and they're leaving the office and they're looking at what's going on the big screen. They stop and they're like,
what's the state of the world right now?
And we can tell a lot about how the AI is performing. Everyone's just seeing the game in action all the time. Maybe you don't get to play into the late ages that often when you're, if you're not at one of our testers. But you see it up on the big screen there. So it's actually been great. And so
that's good stuff.
Those AI autoplay games, they're going to be supported pretty well because we're using them all the time.
Awesome. We haven't got too much longer to wait for it either. October 21st of this year is when it's coming out.
Yep.
Ed Beach, thank you so much for coming on, talking to us about Civilization 6. Enjoy the rest of your E3.
All right. It's been a big pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for watching. I'm almost done with my stint on the show today. We're live until 6 p.m., so there's another 3 hours. My final demo of my slot is on in just a minute. Todd Howard's coming on to talk about Skyrim, so stick around.